to you. Thank you for joining us this day. My name is Mira Mogutu, and it is nice to have you on board. The 30th of November, I think the last day of November. I trust that your day has started off well. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you tuned in and joining us. The show is Good Morning Africa, and I get to bring you the latest news from across the continent. So we shall start by going through the headlines this morning. And we shall start with those from Kenya. The Daily Nation to be paid by beneficiaries of the fund and rises to 9.5% in case of default. And 5-pronged benefits: loans, saving, insurance, investment, and retirement benefits. Okay, and 100 million Kenya shillings, that is the upper limit of annual turnover of businesses to benefit from the fund. One must be 18 to apply some of the conditions, I think, that you have to meet for you to be eligible for that Hustlers Fund that will be launched today. Win for maize farmers. Cabinet pushes imports to next year to give local produce priority. That story is on page 6, I think. The power of social media and power of people understanding their rights within a country and speaking up, because Kenya's made a lot of noise over this, and especially even the farmers that were going to be affected by these imports of maize that were expected to happen. And I hear others already the port, but I think that will be a reprieve, especially for our local farmers. So that story is on page 6. No word on junior high. Anxious candidates and parents wait for announcements. I guess that's also the pain of transition. We're just trying to figure out this new curriculum, but hopefully things will work out there. Vetting resumes. PSAs to take office soon. National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula has directed debating of reports of the suitability of nominees to be completed before MPs proceed on the Christmas break. And the ministry set to spend 2.4 billion on campaign. The money will be spent on leasos, aprons, and brochures, among other items. This is the clean energy. I guess the Ministry of Energy exams. He's there to moral support at Joseph Kang'ethe Primary School in Kibra yesterday. I don't know whether he was helping with distributing the examination papers, I suppose, but there you go. That is the main pictorial on the Star newspaper. Why the IEBC force nabbed House team hearings. That story is on page 7. PS Korir tore my dress and beat me up over food, wife tells court. Devolution. PS Julius Korir returned home hungry and beat up his wife after he found no food ready. A court heard yesterday. The PS estranged wife Evelyn Koech told the court he tore her dress and beat her up while she was naked in front of the children. She was heavily pregnant with a second child at the time and delivered 3 days later. On Tuesday, Koech was overwhelmed with emotion during her testimony, as she told Milimani Senior Resident Magistrate Caroline Muthoni it was not the first time Korir had assaulted her in front of their workers and their children. Okay, the story is on page 2. Regulator now recalls all ARVs from Kikuyu-based maker to avoid confusion. You find that on page 2. Raila to lead Azimio supporters in parallel rally on Jamhuri Day. There's no need for that. Surely this is a day that we celebrate as a country. Raila Odinga, you are a statesman. Pick another day. I don't think we should be able to. I know it fits within our democratic space, but we should be able to mature, if I could just use. Okay, anyway, but my personal feeling about that. And the Standard newspaper, Hustler Fund launch, the good, bad, ugly. President William Ruto will today launch the fund to assist hustlers access cheap credit. The fund will help many businesses start and flourish. However, it has not been an easy ride to get there. The story is on page 6 and 7, and the National Treasury is expected to set aside 50 billion Kenya shillings as the maximum seed capital to Parliament's approval. To qualify for the fund, individuals will have to be 18 years and above and holders of Kenyan national ID. Banks and financial service providers can also apply for loans for forward lending to entrepreneurs or SMEs. I think this is the part that I'd like to understand and hear more about. And also, misappropriation of the fund or providing false information will attract 10 million Kenya shillings fine or jail, 5-year jail term. Mesikia hustlers. All right. ITech landowners fears after squatters court win, that you'll find on page 14 and 15. Change of tact. Raila suspends People's Assembly. Also suspend that one for Jamhuri Day. You're right, Honorable Raila Odinga. That is on page 10. Centum and APSA register huge profits. That is on page 24. And locals spreading fake Ebola. That is on page 26. All right, so that is what we have on the leading newspapers from the country this morning. Let's pay our attention to some regional headlines, and we start with one from Zimbabwe Newsday. Government failing us, that is according to Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission. Zimbabweans are ready for the elections next year. As far as this, democracy is concerned, for what? The Namibian, from Namibia, more SWAPO chaos, that is the main headline. And then the Herald, I think from also Zimbabwe, new measures bear fruit as inflation drops. And then the Sun from Namibia, SWAPO holds CC vote recount. The Guardian from Nigeria, Tinubu lists terms to debate Obi as Arise TV insists on appearance. Last time I think he sent his deputy, his running mate, so that was I think disrespectful to the organizers of that presidential debate. The Nation from Nigeria as well, wicked to reverse. PDP await directive on presidential poll. The Citizen from Tanzania, how UK's post-Brexit trade setup can benefit Tanzania. The Daily News as well from Tanzania, UNAIDS lauds Tanzania's milestone. And a new vision from Uganda, World Bank gives 800 billion Uganda shillings to business women. Okay. The Daily Monitor also from Uganda, 180,000 teachers without degrees risk being fired. Teachers without degrees, 180,000 from Uganda. What is that? How did they qualify? Or what degrees are needed? Okay, that's interesting. And the number there is, I don't know. The Daily News from Egypt, Egypt Equatorial Guinea leaders agree on strengthening economic relations. Because their one term is 7 years there in Equatorial Guinea. So let me just go quickly through the news items, the detailed news items, and then we shall start our conversation. Today we start from Nigeria. And the High Court in Nigeria has sentenced the country's police chief to 3 months in prison for disobeying a court order. The ruling followed a lawsuit by a police officer who was dismissed in 1992. The officer challenged his forced retirement, and his dismissal was later quashed in court. The court found that Inspector General Usman Alkali Baba should serve the 3-month jail term unless he reinstates the police officer. So far, the police force has failed to comply. In a statement, police spokesperson Olumuyiwa Adejobi described the decision as astonishing. He said the police force was studying the ruling to know what action to take. We go to South Africa, where the far-right gunman who killed South Africa's apartheid hero Chris Hani has been stabbed in prison. Officials say the stabbing of Janus Walus days before he was due to be released on parole after nearly 30 years in jail. He was allegedly stabbed by another prisoner and is in a stable condition. Walus, who is 69 now, shot Mr. Hani in 1993 in a failed attempt to derail South Africa's transition from white minority rule to democratic rule. The killing still evokes deep emotions in South Africa. Mr. Hani was regarded the most popular politician after apartheid icon Nelson Mandela. South Africa's government and Mr. Hani's widow Limpo vigorously opposed Walus' attempts to gain his freedom, but in a ruling on November 21st, South Africa's highest court ordered his release within 10 days, saying the Justice Minister's refusal to grant him parole was irrational. We go to Chad, and in Chad, trials are due to have begun inside a prison for around 400 protesters who were arrested last month during pro-democracy demonstrations. Dozens of people were killed during the protest. Rights groups say they were shot by security forces. Those arrested are being held in a remote prison, and lawyers have gone on strike to protest against their alleged mistreatment. It is impossible to know whether the trials have actually begun because they are taking place inside a maximum prison in the Chadian desert, hundreds of kilometers away from the capital, Jema. Defense lawyers can't reach their clients and have now decided to stop attending any trials to protest against the mistreatment of the detainees. The government says the 400 people going on trial orchestrated violence during last month's protest against military rule. Officials said 50 protesters died, but rights groups say the number is at least double that. They accuse the security forces of shooting them dead and have called for an international inquiry. African countries are not on a track to achieve global target of ending HIV-related deaths by 2013. A new report now shows. The UN report to mark World AIDS Day on Thursday highlights the differences in the way that men and women are treated, as well as punitive laws as the main barriers to reach the goal. The UN aims to ensure that 90% of people living with HIV know their status, 90% of those diagnosed are on treatment, and 90% of those taking HIV drugs have achieved a viral suppression, a state where the virus becomes undetectable, thus preventing transmission. In sub-Saharan Africa, young women and girls aged between 15 to 24 years old are 3 times more likely to get HIV than men. Nearly 5,000 new HIV infections are reported every week among this section of the population. The latest from Ethiopia is that the government has dashed any hopes of peace talks with rebels in the restive Oromia region. Expectations had been raised after federal negotiators sat down and made a deal with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, to end the 2-year-long civil war in the north. The Oromo Liberation Army, which has been fighting the federal government, at one time formed an alliance with the TPLF, but an Oromia regional government spokesperson, Hailu Adugna, has since told local media that the government has no plans to sit with a group which has no chain of command or political agenda. The claim has been disputed by OLA spokesperson, who said it will continue to fight. The rebels in Oromia have been accused of being involved in a number of deadly attacks, which it denies. The authorities says that despite there being no talks, they will continue to receive OLA youth who have opted to lay down their arms. The situation in Oromia, the home region of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, has been overshadowed by the war in Tigray, but attacks by different armed groups have continued unabated. And still staying in Ethiopia, there is no timeline for restoring internet access to Ethiopia's embattled Tigray region, as senior government officials said on Tuesday. The restoration of Tigray's internet service will be carried alongside the resumption of its phone and electricity services. Though no date has been set for those goals, Ethiopia's Minister for Innovation and Technology, Belete Mola, said. He was speaking at the UN's annual Internet Governance Forum, being held this week in the Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. Tigray, home to more than 5 million people, has been mostly without internet, telecommunications and banking service since the war broke out between the federal government troops and forces led by the Tigray People's Liberation Front in November 2020. A ceasefire deal signed between the warring sides in South Africa earlier this month commits to the government to restore Tigray's basic services, but the communications blackout has not yet been lifted. And in Namibia, the Deputy Prime Minister Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah is edging closer to becoming the country's first female president. The 70-year-old has just been elected as vice president of the governing party SWAPO, which has been in power since independence in 1990 and has won every election with a large majority. This makes her the frontrunner to succeed President Hage Geingob, who will be stepping down as SWAPO's presidential candidate for the 2024 elections. Mr. Nandi-Ndaitwah, who is Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, beat Prime Minister Sarah Kungelewa and Environment Minister Pohamba Shifete. And in Uganda, environmental activists, religious figures and believers protested Tuesday in Paris against the mega oil projects of the French group Total Energies in Uganda and Tanzania, a first action led by the movement Extinction Rebellion Spiritualities and Green Faith. Extinction Rebellion Spiritualities is a branch of the Extinction Rebellion movement, well known for its civil disobedience actions. Green Faith is an interreligious NGO born in the United States, which fights for climate justice, supported by religious volunteers. The protesters were opposing the East African crude oil pipeline, Antilenga oil field project in Uganda and Tanzania, initiated by Total Energies. The NGOs accused the multinational of taking over land through expropriation and are concerned about the environmental impact on these projects. Interesting. And then Libya, an influential Libyan official said the United Nations Special Envoy would meet with the Joint Electoral Committee made up of rival Libyan factions to start constitutional arrangements for elections. Aquila Saleh, the influential speaker of Libya's East-based parliament, was speaking to reporters in Cairo after meeting Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Gheit. Saleh said the Joint Committee could send their recommendations to the High National Election Commission, which would then be responsible for holding elections earlier this month. Abdoulaye Bathily, the new UN Special Envoy for Libya, warned that the first anniversary of Libya's postponed elections is quickly approaching and that further delaying a vote could lead the troubled North African nation to even greater instability, putting it at a risk of partition. Are they just realizing this? I wonder. And then Russia has donated 260,000 metric tons of fertilizer it produced that was sitting in European ports and warehouses for use by farmers in Africa, the United Nations confirmed on Tuesday. While welcoming the announcement, the UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric told reporters that this will serve to alleviate humanitarian needs and prevent catastrophic crop loss in Africa, where it is currently planting season. He said a ship chartered by the World Food Programme left the Netherlands on Tuesday carrying 20,000 tons of the fertilizer destined for the southeastern Africa nation of Malawi. Dujarric said it will take about a month to reach Beira in Mozambique and then will be transported overland to Malawi, which is a landlocked country. And 18 people accused of involvement in one of West Africa's bloodiest attacks by extremists, a machine gun assault on beach resort in 2016 that left 19 people dead, has gone on trial in Cote d'Ivoire on Wednesday. But only 4 of the 18 will be physically present for the long-awaited proceedings in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, country's economic hub. The others are either on the run or being held in Mali. That is according to the civil lawyers plaintiff. And then we end with the news from Equatorial Guinea, and the US says it has serious doubts on the credibility of Equatorial Guinea's elections. That saw the world's longest-serving president continue his 43-year rule. Teodoro Obiang Basogo 80 secured almost 95% of votes, according to election officials. And the U.S. State Department said that the credible allegations of significant election-related irregularities, including documented instances, fraud, intimidation, and coercion, goes to show that election was not free, transparent. President Obiang seized power in 1979 after a military takeover and has survived several coup attempts. He has a strong grip on the oil-rich Central African nation. And that is where we end our news bulletin this morning. You are now up to date. All right, Mr. Wanda Wesonga has been waiting patiently. Wanda, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Miriam.
And thank you for your patience. I was just watching you there, so I hurried up with the news, but we are here. All right. So I don't know if you'd like to comment on anything from the Kenyan newspapers. You know, the Hustler Fund being launched today, and of course now the cabinet has pushed imports of the maize that was expected in the country. Remember that. You know, so to give local produce priorities, I think that is a good thing for our farmers now.
In fact, when I look into the GMO, that is the court order to suspend the GMO maize from being brought in. Number one, I was wondering why were the minister so keen at allowing the maize to come in? And yet we're having farmers who are still harvesting. Like, I believe that any serious country or any serious nation, before you import any product, then you need to know what you're having in your stores. Like, how do you go ahead to import? You don't know how much you're having. You don't know the deficit. Therefore, this was, I completely don't understand what was happening. Therefore, the move to suspend or to put a stop to this, it's a welcome move. But still, when I look, from the same suspension of that is the court order to suspend the importation of the GMO maize. From it, I read another one serious thing that one, we had the Bill Gates was in, and the Bill Gates ended up telling us that he had for some times been feeding on the GMO wheat. Told us chapati yenye amekula, it was from the GMO. Meaning, Bill Gates was putting an okay on the GMO importation into Kenya, of which when the minister went on to confirm that they're now allowing the GMO maize to be brought in, to me it is like the government had okayed the idea based on the Bill Gates statements that GMO maize, the GMO products are good and there's nothing bad with it. And when the court order now comes in later on to put a no on it, then I feel like the government was under pressure. Either the public outcry or either the farmers' outcry were too hard, they were too noisy that the government could not ignore, such that they now had to go, they had now to take the route of the court so that you try and sanitize so that it's not seen that the government either directly had okayed, then they are now being overpowered by the people. Still on the same note, I look into the reading from different pages that we had the premier, that is the chief cabinet secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, and Linturi, of which Musalia Mudavadi had believed that the minister was indeed wrong. That is the minister CS Moses Kuria, of which you look into the conflict surrounding the importation of the GMO maize, who should do it, and who should not, and who should. It tells a story of unpreparedness, the rush to serve the interest of the unknown. Because and then in this case, we are very happy as a person that at least farmers will have a chance to take control of the market first before we allow farmers from the outside world to come and take control of the market. The other thing that I've quoted from the Daily News, now this is different from Kenyan. Mm-hmm. We have the Russian interest in Africa. Mm-hmm. This is the second time Russia is now donating fertilizers to Africa, mm-hmm. of which Africa's backbone of economy is agriculture. Therefore, in this, I see a competition from the West and the rest of the world to bring close Africa to them. It is a case of like what we once had at the Cold War, where in this case you're struggling to you're competing to take control, but now different from what we had during colonization, where the military conquest was used. This time round, it is a case of you want to make an African feel like you're better than the other one. And I feel like this is what Russians are doing with the donations into what is perceived as the backbone of Africa. Then the last funny thing is the Equatorial Guinea. I feel like some of the African nations were not ready for the Western democracy. That the Western democracy was not an African thing. There are some African leaders who still believe in the hereditary kind of leadership or the kingship kind of leadership. That when you look into, that is the Teodoro Obiang, for leading, having been in power for 43 years, then you are still going for the other notch. You want to still extend your 43-year leadership. Then it still goes ahead to confirm to them that this is a hereditary presidential hereditary leadership by planting his own son as his deputy. Therefore, Theodoro is telling the world that he's telling his own people and the world that Guinea is not a democracy. We are not buying your own democracy, but indeed we are a kingship kind of country. So you forget about, these other things you're telling us in the name of democracy, that we should have the term limits, that we should have a leader coming in for a certain period of time, then they go. Obiang is telling them that leadership belongs to the Obiang's family. Miriam.
Okay. Yeah, yes, indeed. And it's interesting that the U.S. are now, after the elections happened over 2 weeks ago, and this person has been in power for 43 years. He's now just added another 7 years. And he's one of the most corrupt heads of state we have here in the continent. Now, what I find to be interesting is a country like the U.S., France, had been allowing Obiang to do his businesses with their countries. In fact, there's a time he took over. I just did another show a couple of days ago, and I was just talking about just when they just had the elections. And, you know, he's taken over the central bank of Equatorial Guinea. He decided that if that was left to somebody else who knows what they should be doing with the finances of the country, then it will encourage, you know, the civil servants to be corrupt. So he decided, you know, I'll take over that. So I'll be the one in control of the Ministry of Finance and the central bank of the Equatorial Guinea. And immediately he took over that. The next day, you know, Riggs Bank in Washington, his family and him opened about 66 bank accounts in the U.S. How do you walk into even just a normal bank here and open X amount of bank accounts and nobody raises a red flag? But because they were, and one of the leading oil companies that is helping in the exploration and managing the oil in Equatorial Guinea is from the U.S. So what gives the U.S. moral authority to come now and talk to us about this person? Elections are not done well, while you have supported the corruption that has been going on in Equatorial Guinea. You have supported his leadership by allowing him to even, you know, keep his money in your banks there. What moral ground does the U.S. have now to come and tell us that they did not do a good election? We know they didn't. We know the elections were shambolic, that we know. But go ahead.
A country like USA, to me, when they do such things, I mean, at times I feel like it is their way of, it is their real culture, their real person in them. That USA is a funny country. It is a country who cares less. It's the same. Look at the same. In 2017, when we had elections here in Kenya, John Kerry came in. Then he told us elections were absolutely free and fair. Then that is the party that was perceived to have lost laughed at them. Laughed off. Then it is a case of they wanted to prove him wrong. Then we go to the court, and the court tells us the process was not free and fair. But John Kerry from USA had already told us that the process was absolutely free and fair. Now, you look at the USA involvement in a country like DRC Congo. USA is supporting DRC Congo and has been supporting DRC Congo year in, year out in the health sector. At least they normally give them to a range of around $1.7 million on a year basis, of which you look at these, then you look at what is happening in DRC Congo. Then you look at the involvement in this, that yes, we'll be giving you funds to treat your people that you're killing. Then you're like, who is, do they have an idea that these guys are either being killed or they are hurting? So that we still support, we support the regime. We make them in one way or the other cater for the at least some basic needs of their people, in the sense of let's treat their wounds, even if they are hurting or they're fighting, but at the end of the day, we still do business with them. Therefore, when the USA involvement in Equatorial Guinea, it still paints the real picture of what USA is. The same John Kerry, when he came in and talked, told us how the elections were in 2017. It's the same behavior that we are seeing in Bill Gates. That Bill Gates comes in, then what is so keen at is having the GMO products brought into the country. He cares less that this is the harvesting season in the country, but instead is interested in seeing that the agenda are pushed. And therefore, USA as a country, I wish that we Africans get to realize that USA is a country that will always have their own interest, and it has always been so clear whenever they suspect that we have an insecurity issue in a certain area, or we have a conflict in a certain area, they'll only go and pick out their own people, then let the others to suffer. Therefore, it is a country that only cares. It cares about their own interest, their own people. What happens to you, it's upon you, for as long as they get their share. Miriam.
Yeah, and the foreign policy, I guess, is America first, as the 45th President Donald Trump loved to say. Speaking of the U.S. and even the crisis we see today in Congo, I think we talk about these other countries, but we forget the U.S. actually has a hand in what perhaps, placed Congo to a path of perennial wars. U.S. participated in the murder of Patrice Lumumba. They were not happy because the U.S., Belgium, France felt like Patrice Lumumba was slowly embracing the ideals of communism. So perhaps he was moving towards Russia. And so they were not happy with that. So the U.S. is part of the big colluders who actually participated in the murder of Patrice Lumumba. And since then, the Democratic Republic of Congo has not been the same again. So to some extent, they're also responsible for the continued conflict and for the chaos that is being experienced today in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Of course, it has taken many other facets and other things have come out, but that, I think, was the genesis. The killing of Patrice destabilized that country, and they continued to support Mobutu Sese Seko, the dictator, as long as they were also, like you said, he was serving their interest until, he was not. So anyway, speaking of Russia, and you mentioned this story about Russia giving us the fertilizer and the interest. What I find to be interesting in this story, because we know United Nations Security Council has been meeting, and these meetings, a lot of vote has been taken to condemn Russia. But this is hot here because Russia is a permanent member, so it has the veto power. So we will condemn whatever, but nothing can really be done. But the fact that this fertilizer is being facilitated by the United Nations itself, despite of what Russia is doing in Ukraine, that is the part that confuses me. We need this fertilizer so badly that we must get it.
Okay, not really. It's not that we really need this fertilizer, but Africa has always positioned itself as a continent or as a people who cannot stand on their own, as a people who believes that they have to beg, as a people who believes that they cannot do their own things unless the Western world supports them. Therefore, you'll be surprised there are times when we allow these products come in or we get these donations, we at times don't use them in the rightful way. That yes, we'll receive them because in our mindset we believe that we're supposed to receive. Therefore, what Russians are doing and what the rest of the world are doing, and Africa in itself, it is just what Africa is used to. That we are used to receiving, whether it is the right time we receive, whether we're in a dire need or not. It is the culture of Africans that we have to be given.
All right, and you don't find the United Nations a bit contradictory there, because they have been.
Yeah, like the United Nations, okay, I don't think the United Nations was even established to serve the interests of Africans. Like when you look into, for instance, what is happening in the DRC Congo, people normally get killed under the watch of UN and the UN peacekeepers. But they'll always look on them, and therefore, and in this case, when Africans are killed under the watch of the United Nations peacekeepers, believe me, if one soldier from that peacekeeping team is killed, then it will be amplified by the UN. The rest of the world will know that we had a Serbian who was killed in the DRC Congo. They will not talk about the millions of Africans that were killed. And still look into the formation of the UN in 1945. They only formed the United Nations organizations because they felt like they were killing each other, they were hurting their own economy. It had nothing to do with Africa. Therefore, at times I look at the United Nations organization as an organization not meant for African interest, but an organization meant to serve the interest of the Western world. Mm-hmm. Because if the organization was formed on the grounds of insecurity, on the grounds of mass killing, the torture of the children, women, and all. I mean, every person that is every person in this case. Mm-hmm. Then why is it that when Africa is facing the same troubles that they faced in 1930s, 1940s, they don't consider Africa and prioritize the African interests under the United Nations Security Council? Mm. Therefore, to me, when I look into the formation, that it was formed to serve the purposes of healing the world in the sense of not fighting again, healing the world in the sense of trying to find ways out of solving or sorting insecurity issues or conflict issues, then we now we are as a continent in positions in a position similar to when the UN was formed. Then the United Nations is not coming in to address the very challenges the way it addressed the same challenges in 1940s. Then I feel like UN was never meant for Africa. It is until when Africans under the AU, the African Union, that is AU, African Union, establish or promote the African Union Security Agency, so that the agency now treats the African insecurity with the seriousness it deserves. Mm-hmm. That today the energy that is being used to address the Russia-Ukraine conflict and the energy that is being used to address the insecurity in Africa, they're just completely different. The case here is, someone said we have the ETC and us, so we are the ETC, and they are the ones okay. that matters.
Yes, it's like it's just an organization that, for Africa, it's just meant to manage Africa, to manage our hope somehow, to make us feel like we are part of, but not exactly. So, yeah, maybe we should relook our relationship with the United Nations, truly, because we see, and you've rightfully put the examples, things that have been happening in this continent. I mean, Libya, this is something that has gone on for a long time now. We see the insecurity even happening in Nigeria. We see even what is happening in Ethiopia. That war has claimed so many lives. A genocide was just happening under our nose. And what happened? The UN wasn't so quick to come in and, whatever. But I think they believed the African Union would do, and African Union did not do a very good job until, I think, right now, Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the list goes on. So I think we're just there to be managed. That's how I normally feel. It's just a big international political caucus that Africa still remains like spectators, because as much as we don't even have that permanent vote, we're just there to be counted and to be seen. And maybe sometimes if whatever we say would even be interesting to them, I don't know, they'll veto it. But anyway, let's move on from that. Ethiopia's government has dashed any hopes of peace talks with rebels in the Recife Oromia region. Expectations had been raised after federal negotiators sat down and made a deal with the Tigray People's Liberation Front to end the 2-year-long civil war in the north. So the Oromia Liberation Army, at some point the OLA, they were fighting together with the TPLF. They were offering support. And I believe for them to have even thought it was okay for them to support TPLF, there might have been some undertone of discontent with the government itself, and that's why they felt it was within their rights to support the TPLF, but government only engaged the TPLF. So now the OLA, the Oromo Liberation Army, is feeling, why are we not being engaged? And yet we have also some issues that we need to iron out with the government, the federal government led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. we've seen some progress being made and through the mediation process, which I think is a very good thing. And the TPLF, I think, our spokesperson the other day, I was reading somewhere, said they have no intention of picking up arms and starting war. The path, and so far they've come, they're willing to work out the rest of the issues through diplomacy and mediation, because that is their country and they've had enough of that. But this OLA, they feel different. They feel unheard. They feel they need certain things to square out with the government. But Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is saying, no, I will not give you the time of day. So before we see this going out of hand again, will mediation be the proper thing right now? That OLM, perhaps the government, through Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, would invite them to the table and maybe just hear them out to avert any further unnecessary conflict? We can't hear you, you're muted.
Sorry. Now, at first we had such kind of a discussion here when we had this peace negotiation in South Africa, of which we were looking at the parties involved. Then we raised a question on why is Oromia not involved, of which we thank God and we are happy that at least the process went on well, and peace was. Peace started being realized in Ethiopia. Now, what Oromo or Oromia are trying to do, they're trying to tell the Ethiopian in general that we also matter. According to them, they have developed a mindset or a feeling that if they don't push or if they don't stamp the authority, then they will be squashed out. People will, the country will ignore them in future. Therefore, it's very important that the Prime Minister or the Ethiopian government looks at it, because if nobody addresses this one as early as now, then we have the opportunists that normally take advantage of such cases. That we might have a certain group that will decide to join OLA, then they'll want to support them, then it might end up growing and building up into, a very different insecurity case, different from what we are saying. Like, we also have one group that we rarely talk about, that is the Amhara. Mm-hmm. When you look at the Amhara as a region, the Amhara are crying and they're complaining. And they have been pointing fingers at Oromia, pointing fingers at the Tigray. Today, when you take note of either the clips that are circulating, the information that are circulating, believe me, know that we have the Amharas in the diaspora that have their own websites, they have their own group, trying to support their own brothers and sisters back in Ethiopia that are hurting, that they believe they're being manhunted or they're being, in this case, they're being killed. But with the OLA as a group and what is happening in Ethiopia, it is a simple thing that if no one talks about it, it might escalate and become a very big issue. That it is only a case of Oromia. But they were ignored. They were perceived as the underdogs. Therefore, they're only trying to tell the world that we are not underdogs. And in this case, we are not underdogs. And for them to be heard, they will want to cause insecurity in the country. Therefore, it's important that the leadership of the OLA is put on the table, because I feel like the negotiation will only take a day or so, then it will be, they'll be done with it. But if they ignore it, the opportunist group might take advantage of it, then they might back. Mm-hmm. Then they'll end up forming an ally with OLA, then it might end up being a threat.
Okay, very well. Now, the Oromo Liberation Front is a nationalist organization formed in 1973 to promote self-determination for the Oromo people inhabiting today's Oromia region and Oromia zone in the Amhara region of Ethiopia. The OLF has offices in Addis Ababa, Washington, D.C., and Berlin, from where they operate Amharic and Oromo radio stations. The Oromo Liberation Army, the one that we are talking about now, was for many years the armed wing of the OLF. So the OLA is the armed wing of the Oromo Liberation Front. That's how we know it. So you can see the agenda is perhaps a little different. This is an organization that was formed to promote self-determination. I'm assuming they want to secede. That is how you self-determine. So perhaps could this be the reason why Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed does not want to engage them, because maybe their agenda is different? We know the TPLF were in power in Ethiopia for 27 years, so I don't think they want to leave Ethiopia. It's only that they felt that this new government was not inclusive enough, and perhaps not hearing them. And so by Prime Minister not wanting to engage with them, are we just sweeping things under the rug and hope that they will go away? Or are we just averting crisis to a later date? And I know you've explained it.
To me, this is it is a crisis that is building up.
That is being postponed.
Yes. Yes, madam?
I'm saying it is a crisis that is being postponed for a later date.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if someone is having a gun, and if someone can shoot, if someone can aim at a target and exactly aim at it and shoot and get it, then this person has already been involved in a crisis as a serious party. Then you only took a section of it, because we had the Tigray and we had the Oromo. Then it's only Tigray that was removed from this conflict, from the parties involved. Then Oromo or Oromia was left there. So in this case, these guys are likely to go back on the drawing board, then bring back the crisis that we had. Because to them, they only know that they only need a backing for them to do it, for them to fight. And in this case, because Eritrea was involved, because the Arabs were involved in this, then Oromia as a region have a place to go and seek help. If Ethiopia will fail probably to live to the agreement that they had either with Eritrea, then Oromia promises a gold different from either silver that was promised to Eritrea by Ethiopia, then Eritrea will be easy to back the Oromia. Then we'll get back to square zero. Therefore, I feel like it's very important that this issue gets addressed as early as now, because we leave it the way it is, then this is a serious crisis that is being postponed. It is a time bomb that will explode in the coming days.
And do we just let Eritrea go scot-free? Because we know there are credible reports that show Eritrea was part of this conflict in Ethiopia, even as Ethiopia tries to sort out its internal affairs. Where do we place Eritrea right now? What should African Union do?
The African Union should not just ignore that the role that Eritrea played in the Ethiopian crisis, because Eritrea proved to Africa that it can support a crisis, that it can be a party to a group that will lead to insecurity in the region. And I don't know why the AU, unless AU knows what was happening and we don't know, but I don't know why AU knew that Eritrea was involved in this crisis. Then during the negotiation, they had the Eritreans not on the table, though they knew they were involved in this. Then they were pushed aside, and when peace was realized, or when we started realizing peace, we forgot that Eritrea existed. That we ended up acting like a warthog that was being chased by a lion. Then when it walked, when it ran from, when the lion disappeared from the background, then it imagined that the lion had, it was no more. It was just imagining that the lion existed. Therefore, someone should put the leadership of Eritrea on the table. Then they should have a candid discussion to get the understanding to the root cause of why they were involved in this crisis, what was their interest in this crisis, so that we get to be so sure as a continent, as a region, that in future we are not going to have such a case. And it is the same reason that I'm having a belief or a mindset or an imagination that if we don't address the Oromo issue today, then Eritrea might at some point come back in favor of Oromo.
Okay, very well. Thank you so much for that great analysis this morning. That is Mr. Wanda Wesonga. We are going to take a very short break, then we shall be coming back to look at the security situation in Somalia. We know the first batch of ATMIS was meant to be leaving in December, but as things appear, I think they have extended. So what is really happening there in Somalia, and is Al-Shabaab becoming more deadly and employing other tactics that perhaps might force these other players to do better, or to intensify on even their intelligence, as we saw the other attack happening just close to Villa, Somalia. I mean, what is going on? So we shall find out and talk about that in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Miriam Ogutu. This has been Good Morning Africa. Good morning.